So we have our experts here with us today to take us through the 5-day pre-release period. This is when you are receiving the pre-release information and you don't know what you need to do in the 5 days, right? So they're going to help you how to be successful and make sure you secure not only a C, but a potential HC. So Nick, the first question will go to you. So the candidate was asking, how much time should you spend on industry research?
It's a good question, and I think it's one of those tough ones where it really does depend. It depends a lot on what the industry is, and it depends how much you know about it initially. So, for example, my mock exam was on a solar power plant. I knew nothing about it. It meant that I had to spend a lot of time researching that industry. When it got to our final exam, it was on an airline. It was a lot easier to relate, to actually understand the customer journey. It meant that I could spend a lot less time doing that initial research. But it does then mean you spend more time understanding the competitive space, maybe more from a business perspective. I think it's one of those where it's kind of, you need to trade off the technical and the industry, and there's no kind of set answer for everyone. It's going to depend a little bit on how much you know and how much you don't know.
I love that. And I think understanding that each industry is different is very important. So one of the things that I used to do in the space of after getting my assessment results for the supplementary to the psych board exam, right? There's like a month and a half. I used to Google every industry, try to research, how it works and just be intrigued by it so that when the exam does come, whatever industry I'm getting, I'm well prepared to know, okay, I know a little bit about it, right? Not in depth, but I have an idea. So I think that's very important. So Dida, one of the candidates asked, how does one identify triggers that they need to research?
Thanks, Nthamiseng. I think it goes back to the basics of when we started this whole APC course. We were taught the different types of triggers. You'll hear contextualization, and that is all about relatability, just relating you to the company, relating you to the industry, what exactly it is about. You find your direct technical triggers, and these are very clear and very specific to what we've studied. It's an IFRS question, it's an audit, straightforward question that we will have expected anyway. And there are some of those that are research-based, and they may be direct, both direct and indirect. Sometimes you will be told that, hey, we'll be talking about this, and you will have ticked off for yourself to say, this is not my technical space. I wouldn't have done any of this in the 4 disciplines that I did. This is definitely research because it's asking me stuff outside of what I normally know. Or sometimes it can be indirect in that they really just passing by that, but it forms a critical part of you understanding the business itself. So I think how to identify the research or the triggers to research is really based off of that. If it's not one of what you technically know, it's most probably something to research. But then again, how much of that research I think is something we'll be talking on this, because sometimes we fall into the trap of researching a research and another research. So the wallowing down of finding my own trigger within the research itself. I went on reading about sustainability. I found the standards that are there to read about. I go on to read further on what the standards are about, and sometimes it may go off the way. But really, to answer your question, to understand that this is a trigger for me to research, it will most probably be outside of your technical. It's also not for context. It's not purely just for you to know and understand the business. It's very clear you've got to know this thing.
I love that.
Can I just add something on that? And it's so important because what I often see is another challenge is people become over-triggered. Now, you must be able to focus to, well, the best practice that when I wrote was 10 to 12. To actually narrow down what are the key 10 to 12 questions. If you find yourself being triggered by 20 things, probably not going to be able to focus on those, right? So you want to be able to narrow down. That's that magic number, 10 to 12 around there. And then focus on what are the big questions. When it's in the question there, what are they struggling with? What is the investment decision? What's the technical question? What are they raising as, I'm not sure about this. Can you help me understand this more? That's how you actually identify what the problem areas are. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Knowing why you're doing the research in the first place. Because now, when you understand why you're doing it, you're going to be able to put yourself in the marker's shoes to say, okay, if I understand why this is being triggered, how can they ask it now on the day so that you can better prepare for any scenario that comes? So, Lesejo, I'm going to just pose the next question to you when they say that when reading the pre-release information, obviously it's broken down into the background information first, and then we go to the emails and the actual triggers. So, how does a candidate know how much research must be done for each segment?
This is an interesting question because I'm going to give an audit response. It depends. It really does depend because it will be triggered by the email in itself, right? So sometimes a CFO will be going through an issue and they say, help me understand this certain thing. And then you will see, okay, I have to do some research around making them understand. But I always say when you're researching and you're thinking about triggers, always think about the 6 disciplines, right? Don't think about the research in itself by getting context, but what are the audit implications? Financial reporting, management accounting, tax, compliance, and non-compliance laws and regulations and ethics, right? Always use that as a foundation of research so that you have enough coverage over those 6 areas. And then depending on how much information is given from that email or even like that background information when they're telling you about the company or the industry in which it operates, that will also give you context based on familiarity of the company and the space and the industry to know whether am I comfortable with what the company actually does. Because I think it's important to know that the point of the research is to give you enough information so that when you're asked a question, you have the thinking, you have the foundation. It's not about the answer. And I think that's why people want to know how much research, as if like I can say maybe 10 pages is going to get you through. But the reality is it enough foundation knowledge to give you a base of discussion and consideration? So we like this thing of saying, have you considered this? Have you considered that? So that's where I think the 6 disciplines approach is going to help you in terms of how much. But like Nicholas said, it's about, are you familiar with the company, the industry? That will really guide you. So I really think, again, people need to be clear about why they're doing the research and also being open to know that they could be challenged. So I would also encourage people to talk amongst maybe like another group and see whether their thinking is around the same place or whether they are going on a loophole and maybe they're just doing too much. Because I think what tends to happen is they're trying to resolve a question, whereas another team saw a different angle, right? So breadth of the research is important, but also making sure that like on the specific day or on even when you are doing your research, you're very clear that it's about foundational knowledge.
Yeah, I completely agree because I think also what candidates must consider is the fact that they need to marry the background information to the actual emails because there is a link there. So for example, in the background information, you have the financial statements. It's very important to assess that because what if a document is triggering whether you need to invest in a specific project? So now if you're experiencing liquidity issues in the financial statements, obviously that's something that you need to bring into your answer and your research when you're looking at that specific investment opportunity to begin with, right? So I think having that link between the background information that is basically guiding the emails and the documents is very important. So Onkgopote, when we are doing research, right, many candidates tend to use AI, right? So I just want to hear your thoughts on what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to using AI for APC research.
The principle here is, remember, you must retain and learn and understand the research that you're doing. You don't want to be fed something and not actually understand the process behind it. Because it is in fact the process of going to gather information, going to see what are the different answers. Why is this one particularly right? What are the options? You need to understand how you actually get to the answer. So if you use AI, you run the risk of just getting to the answer and not getting the process. And in fact, it's about the process and not the answer most of the time, right? Because remember, you're building breadth of knowledge. So It is there. AI is there. We use it in the workplace. We use it in our lives. Some people use it as therapists. Maybe that's a good way to use it, help you to focus on the week. But don't use it on autopilot. Use it as a co-pilot. That's important. It's a way to refine your thinking. It's a way to actually bounce back some ideas. The same way that you would have had team members and group members that you ask questions from, other people who are writing the exams, or you can say, I see things in this way. Why am I right about it? Why am I wrong about it? Use it to assess what you're actually gathering. And also, again, use it as a way to get more information. It's a more powerful Google. It actually helps you get different options. But be careful of it as well, because it hallucinates, right? It can hallucinate, and you can actually go with the information that you tell it. Something about AI is it's a yes man. If you tell it this is wrong, it'll say, oh, yeah, right, and it'll give you a different answer. So be able to understand when it gives you those initial answers, click in those hyperlinks, follow and see why this is so. Ask it what other perspectives can it have. Use it as a co-pilot, as a tool and mechanism, not as how you just get, the final answer, because you're going to lose the process.
Yeah, I think also understanding the fact that you need to apply professional judgment now to see which answer is actually right. And when you are disagreeing with it, you need to be able to know how to argue back, to say, no, just fix this because I disagree. And this is the reason why I disagree. And the only way you can get through that is if you understand your technical knowledge, right? So that's where professional skepticism also does apply as well. But Nicholas, just to sum up the research aspect, right? How does a candidate know when the research is sufficient?
I think it's going to be back to the old favorite answer of it depends. But the way I like to think about the research is in different silos. So for me, you've got your technical research, and that's really structured around your different triggers. You've got your more maybe ethics-based kind of research, and then overarching that, you've got this industry research. And I think they all kind of interlink. The bulk of your time, in my opinion, should be kind of on the triggers that you've identified. And what I used to do is kind of use that industry research to break that up a little bit. It was always my starting point. So I'd start with understanding the industry, but then also use it to break up the technical triggers. So I get quite antsy if I feel like I'm not doing something productive. So it was really difficult for me to take structured breaks. But a way I kind of worked around this is I would try and find a podcast or something like that that's linked to the industry or a competitor or something. And for me, that was a good switch off from the technical research, but I still felt like I was being productive and doing some industry research, and it was a different source and a different opinion. And I found that really helped. I think trying to find that line of, do you know enough? Have you done enough research? Is always going to be tricky. And I think it's one of the things that you need to try figure out in the exams leading up to the final is, where's that cutoff point of, I've done enough that I feel confident in my research and that I'm all right to deal with twists and turns on the day, but also not working right up into the point of the exams starting, because that is an absolute recipe for stress and panic on the day. So it is a fine line to get it right. I think also just being able to accept that you're not going to know absolutely everything, but knowing enough that you can adapt on the day when something might be a little bit different to the pre-release is always a good kind of indicator.
So I think the two takeaways I was getting from you is that you need to know when to stop. And number two is you need to be confident in the work you already put in, right? Because if you're not confident, you're not able to stop, basically. But the next question will go to you, Lesego. It's basically how to tackle a new standard within 5 days. For instance, getting the insurance industry, especially if I'm a trainee from the public sector, we never get exposure to that. So how do you ensure that the candidate can master IFRS 17 within 5 days and not neglecting the other standards?
This is a tough one because I don't think it's about mastering in that 5 days, because it's not possible. I think when they introduce a new concept, I think they, again, trying to give you context. Because let's say, for example, I didn't write this, but I prepared with this exam. But 2020, they wrote about avocados. And we do agriculture, and nobody has ever seen the standard. We know it's there, but we never looked at it. So the avocados give people anxiety. I'm pretty sure if I say avocados, they know what I'm talking about. But it was a new standard, right? Not familiar to people. And I think what people tend to do is, because they're not familiar, they go into panic mode. They go into, I need to master this thing in the 5 days, and they neglect everything else. Same principle. You need to understand the foundation of that standard and in context of that company, because sometimes you might go into a rabbit hole of actually doing the scope, going to the B appendix because you want to see examples, you really want to get the gist of it, but you are at risk of doing too much because out of panic, you're not being guided correctly. So I think it's important to bring it back to what is the conflict in the email, or even in the research, or even in the industry or company information. Is there a conflict? And with the knowledge that I have about this new standard, can I address the conflict? That's the bare minimum that you need to know. I don't think SAICA is trying to catch us out, because I think when they see a new standard, they're like, oh, they're here. They're coming for us now, you know? But the reality is, you are going to become a problem solver in business as a CA, and every other day a client is going to ask you something. And as a CA, you're expected to at least be able to say, have you considered this? Perhaps if you consider this. So it's the same approach that when you're seeing something new for the first time, do you know the considerations that mean you have to take left or take right? So go through the foundations, but remember, 8 hours, they cannot ask you one standard. Right? So you have to make sure that you bring in the balance by doing the rest of the research for the other standards that you really know. And don't just practice this on the day of the exam. I think what people tend to do with the psych exam is they're isolated to the psych exam, but you have the board course to try different things. And I mean, we got our LCs and our BCs because we were trying different things, right? So if you're really trying to get a C from the word go, you might just miss out on the opportunity. But really try different approaches to see, hang on, in the board course, did they ask me something that I was unfamiliar with, and how did I respond? And that is also going to help you manage these new standards that are new in the 5 days, and you're really trying to like scramble your way through them. But have an approach to it and understand that it's about saying, would I know how to address the conflict at the end of the day?
I would like to add something there, and it's very tactical. I use this resource, Sylvia Ifris Box. That lady,
Yes, I love her.
bless her soul. Great person. And the reason for that is she really contextualizes what is important in the standard. She'll go into, these are the key things that they're trying to do, and that's what you need to get, that foundation. It's not about understanding the BCs and going deep into it and having all the scenarios, anything that can happen, but it's about what are the key principles. Because remember, you are building a framework, and when you have the framework, the question will come and you'll say, this is asking these particular things, you apply. So I like that point, because you're not trying to become an expert in avocados in the 5 days, but you're trying to understand this agricultural standard. What are the key pillars of it? What are the key questions that happen here? I have a framework, I'll apply it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that candidates must remember is that cycle will never test an entire standard. We will not finish, right? Especially if you're testing IFRS 15 or 16, those standards are long, they're lengthy, right? So you need to understand what section of that specific standard is triggered. So Dida, I'm going to go to you, right? Now we're moving into the finance space. And the candidate basically asked how to approach a strategy and risk management question.
Both of them are quite broad topics. I think they're more and mainly based on the understanding of the business itself. One must have a helicopter view. I think that's what some mentors call. If you are trying to look at just a particular part of the business and trying to strategize from that, perhaps the strategy will not be for the rest of the business and might not work. And in the same light, I think there are various tools of understanding businesses. I think we were taught that back in financial management itself as well, around the SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. For you to be able to strategize against our threats, you must know what those threats are. For you to be able to capitalize on our opportunities, you must know what those opportunities are. And so as part of that 5-day period, perhaps the first day itself is about taking out and sitting down to take out what the strengths of the business are, what the opportunities of the business are, the weaknesses, the threats themselves, and go into other tools. PESEL is there, your political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental, the various factors that you could look into from all angles to try and understand how is this business, if this business operates in South Africa in this concentrated space, what types of laws and regulations apply in that space? Because your strategies must speak to that. If you have a strategy that says you must do this and that is illegal in that state, then you've got problems. And so strategy itself must be based on the understanding of the business itself. There are various other tools, Potter's 5. We could talk until forever, but the whole idea and the concept is you must be able to sit on, I guess at the end of the 5 days, you must be able to sit and explain the business to me without necessarily thinking of what questions they could potentially ask in the APC itself, in the IOD. You must be able to explain the business. This is the type of business I'm running or I'm involved with. These are the challenges that it has. These are the opportunities that it could potentially have. This is how much money we have. And in all forms, your cash, your equity, can we take up more debt? You must understand the business from all angles to be able to do strategy. Otherwise, done in isolation could cause challenges and problems. And I think that's my take on strategy. We need to understand the business, use whatever tools are there to understand the business more, and don't understand the business to strategize. Understand the business to understand the business. And the strategy will come as you read more and you understand things, because you're able to knit in some points and tie in, oh, that doesn't make sense. If this is the type of business, then that's the issue. Strategies change then over time. Risk management is broad again. One talks on audit risk. You understand audit risk. You've got inherent risk that combined with the other type of risk, you'd find your risk of material misstatement. That risk of material misstatement with audit risk that the auditors might not detect it, you end up having your risk overall on the book itself. So there are different. I think auditors will go on and do risk itself and understand it well. You must go on and study and understand. If you're talking audit risks, go on and understand what exactly makes an audit risks. As I said, in that formula itself, you find what's inherent in the business. These are the types of challenges that you find in this businesses. If you're talking about particular types of accounts or particular balances, doing risk management for that, you'd look into what's inherent in that book. What are the challenges in the controls? So if there's a control risk that comes in that, both of that, the inherent risk and the control risk, meaning in the risk that exists in this business, if there aren't controls to mitigate that, then you find a risk of material misstatement. Different types of risks will then be presented. But again, it's at the basis of understanding the business itself. It's going to be difficult to find what's a potential risk for the business, operational risks, audit risks, whatever type of risks you're talking about, for us to be able to understand that it must be based off of the understanding of the business itself.
Yeah. And I think also another thing that candidates must consider is the fact that when you're making a decision, you must think about not only the entity, but the stakeholders around us. So how does the decision affect our employees, our suppliers, the value chain, our community at large? So I think that is a very important thing to also note. And Nicholas, I'm going to pose the next question to you when it comes to ethics, because I spoke about considering the community and everything, right? And there's something called corporate citizenship. So how do you actually prepare for an ethics question during the 5-day period? Because I know many candidates wait for it to be explicitly triggered on the day, but how can you make sure that you are well prepared in the 5 days?
Yeah, I think ethics in the pre-release period is one of those areas that you have a love-hate relationship with, because it's the one question you're going to get 100%, but it's also the only question that will be different on the day. It's not going to be something that could only be seen from the pre-release. So how do you prepare for something that is going to be there, but you don't know what it's going to look like? That's really challenging, and it's a difficult one to fit into your 5-day plan. But there are ways that we can kind of deal with that. And there were two things, or there's two ways that I split it up. The one is, well, how do you kind of deal with something that you're not sure what it's going to be, is you kind of fall back to your frameworks and you work around those. And there's a few that you can rely on. We've got the Code of Professional Conduct. That's a really good starting point for any kind of approach to ethics. We've got a great standard set out on how to approach these difficult situations that are a bit in the grey. We've also got kind of approaches to non-compliance with laws and regulations. There's certain things that you can kind of look at. So there's really frameworks that you can rely on, and that comes with practicing it, thinking about it through that lens, you know, a lot of what ifs. And then the other is also looking at what could be specific to the industry or to this company. So within that, whatever industry you're looking at will have its own set of kind of laws and regulations that are specific to that industry, and often those can come through in an ethics question, either directly or indirectly. But if you think of your framework as your tool to kind of get the structure of your answer right, understanding those specific risks or the specific areas for non-compliance that are specific to your industry, that's how you bolt onto that and make it a well-rounded ethics answer. So I think it kind of comes through implicitly while you're doing your industry research and spending time understanding the company, just having at the back of your mind, thinking of it through that what-if lens and saying, what could go wrong, what would I be worried about, specifically for the company, and then on the day relying on your frameworks to kind of adjust to what's given to you.
Yeah.
Can I just add just on that? I think it's important that the candidates are also mindful that within their training firms, there are ethical protocol around how to respond to certain things. So I think this opens up the conversation to know, do you understand the ethical policies in your own firm, in your own company that you can apply? Because then it will also give you a framework based on even that, like the CPC and whatnot, to know, okay, in the workplace, these are the things that happen. Because I think what we tend to do is we think of ethics like a textbook answer, whereas the ethic questions that come on the day are actual things that are happening between real people, you know. And I think because you've never thought about ethics as a textbook question or just a real question, like now it's like, how would I go about this? But take time off to go and check your ethics in your company. How do you guys deal with ethical issues, implications? Every company has a CPC. Understand, speak to HR, like have conversations with other people and just find out about those certain things.
So Lesego was saying it helps if you're ethical yourself.
Basically.
And I think one of the things that candidates can use is the AI tool that you mentioned. And one of the things that I used to do was explain to the AI tool that, listen, this is the industry that I'm in. This is the company that I'm currently working for. What possible ethical dilemma can occur, right, in that space? So for example, if I'm in construction, obviously the example would be maybe there's a safety issue, someone got injured at work. So how will I be able to respond to that, right? So it will give you different types of ethical scenarios so that you can get an idea of what can actually be triggered so that you better prepare for that. But Lesego, the last question will go to you with regards to what is your thoughts on the APC packs that candidates receive?
Why did I have to get the controversial one? The packs, I'm going to be firm in my response. Don't do them. I think packs are dangerous territory, if I'm honest, because the reality is you need to put in the research yourself. Unkopoza mentioned the process of getting to the answer is what's important. And I think what people tend to do is they neglect the process. So they want a pack because a pack feels like a quick fix. You know what I mean? And somebody somewhere in another country in one big organization came together and they somehow in 3 days came up with this beautiful thing and supposedly it's supposed to get you through the exam. It's very tempting, right? I think anything that's easy is tempting, but again, it goes back to your ethics, right? Ethically, the APC exam is supposed to be done with the people in your group, whereas the people that are writing, you guys also have conversations with other groups, but at least you know the source of where this information is coming from. The pack, we cannot even trace where they come from. You know, we hear rumors through the corridors somewhere. They come, they verify it, but we don't even know, right? So I think it's important to be honest with yourself. And I always tell people it's a firm no for me because, again, you don't have the question to the APC exam. And I think people think the packs have the answers and somehow these people have come up with suggested solutions for the questions, but we don't know what the questions are. So it's important to not neglect the what the intention of the exam is trying to achieve, and run to easy fixes like the PACS. So I will confidently stand on my no and say, don't do the PACS. Don't do that.
Yeah, and I think as a candidate, you need to ask yourself, where are they coming from, right? Because now, if you don't know where they're coming from, how do you know if it's correct? And I love the fact that you touched that the person who prepared them does not even know what psycho is going to test on the day. So I wouldn't personally risk my life like that, right? I
And
don't know
also,
about you guys.
just the last thing, I think there was like people must be informed about the PACS. There was a bit of backlash in the past where people did use PACS, and unfortunately there was confidential client information. And things like that are very risky, because I think sometimes out of panic, we just think of the situation now, but you don't think of the implications holistically. What if you were exposed to the PACS, and it's like an ethical concern? So I think it's important that at the end of the day, when you are a CA, it's the harder route, it's the ethical route, it's the leadership route, it's the don't just take the broader road, just go for the narrow one, do your work, prepare, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think when you're part of the difference maker community, that's when you need to understand that you need to embody ethics and integrity as a person. So that's something that as a candidate, everybody must consider. So I just need you guys to just name one line on that's gonna be a key takeaway for the APC candidates for the 5 days. If ever you were to give advice to your former candidate self, what would it be? Dida, I'll start with you.
Don't slot anything and everything to your file. The moment you need to go on and reread the file during the exam, you're out. So don't take anything that you yourself don't know. So it's important that you know everything that's in there. I can reproduce the file if it burns.
Come on.
That's good.
Oh, that's good.
I love
Listen.
that.
Nick?
For me, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's 5 days and a long exam. Don't try get everything done on day one. Pace yourself, because it really, what happens on the day is what actually counts. So prepare well, but prepare balanced.
Oof, I can't follow up on you guys. You guys are killing it. But I'll stick to this one. Be ethical. You know, I think there's a lot of temptation. We spoke a lot about AI. And I think sometimes we are so one-sided about our journey in that moment, and we just want to pass, and ethics goes out the window. But being a CA is about being ethical at all costs, at all times, even when you are qualifying and you're an aspiring CSA. So be ethical.
I'd say own that you can do this. When you're asked the questions, to understand that you've been on a journey for 7+ years. And it means at this point, you're equipped with all the things that you need to be able to answer these questions, to be able to attempt these and go through these industries. You have what it takes. You actually have what it takes. Just live it out.
Love that. But thank you so much for joining the panel to discuss how to actually be successful and be effective in the 5 days. And I think the candidates will really, really, really reap from the seeds that you have sown today. So thank you so much for being a part of this. And there you have it, candidates. This is the 5-day pre-release information period. And it's how to basically be successful in it and make sure that you are passing and get that C potential HC, right? So that is our take on how to be effective.